Hello, this is Jim Schaefer, executive producer and host of Rip Rap, the academic book television program. My guest today is Randy Baier. Today we'll be discussing scholarly research that we have decided to examine. Welcome to Rip Rap, Randy.
Once again.
The first book was a little bit unusual, but I thought since we're recording this just before Christmas, for January, it's called The Dawn of Hope, a memoir. And it's written by a woman who was a niece of General Charles de Gaulle, and who had joined the underground during World War II. And I thought that at this time of the year, in this season, it's useful to think about the people who are suffering and not able to easily enjoy the holidays. And that's what she talks about in this book, because at one point she was shipped in the now legendary cattle cars to a Nazi death camp, Ravensbrück, and addresses, it's her memoir, but she's addressing the people who have suffered.
Who didn't survive.
And these days, I saw pictures of the Syrian refugees under this horrible, there's so many more refugees than they can even have camps for, so they're...
And it's cold there.
Yeah.
Very cold.
Snowing.
Yeah.
And so they're staying in abandoned factories, I mean, anywhere they can find a spot to live. And so I thought it was useful that at this time to remember people in those, and this is a very graphic and vivid thing about what it's like to be in those circumstances, where there was more, bodies piled on top of each other, and they couldn't look at SS guards, or they'd be attacked. You have sort of nightmares, sort of a surrealistic kind of thing. She talked about one night she had been dreaming of a big magnolia tree covered with flowers, and that she felt her cell was filled with the smell of magnolia blossom. And she remembered that was under such a tree that a woman friend told her mother was dead. So I just thought hope it's not too morbid, but these days there's a lot of people really suffering. I've seen images of people being thrown into pit graves, they can't even, and also some of the survivors of these hurricanes that have gone on, and they live in these diseases. But then there's the hope part is very powerful, because when she finally got released and passed through the camp gate, she said it was still snowing, the wind was like ice, and she could look back and see the silhouettes of several women. She said dawn was just breaking. Could it perchance be the dawn of hope?
But she miraculously survived that camp.
Yeah.
She was very young then at the time, or?
Yeah, but it's Genevieve de Gaulle Antonese. And I've interviewed other people who have interviewed, Holocaust survivors, and it's just something beyond language.
Yeah.
And so I find it fascinating, but I don't mean to be too morbid, but there are people suffering as we're celebrating. But then we can go on and have a little fun here with accountable, but to have a smiley. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I thought it was interesting because the big issue at this moment in nation's history is going to a national health care system, and there's all kinds of technical issues going on with that. In fact, maybe what we should do first is go to this book, David Weinberger's Everything is Miscellaneous.
It's a good title.
Which applies, it fascinates me about digital disorder. People assume that technology is very rational, very easy, but I don't think that's true.
Well, the subtitle here is The Power of the New Digital Disorder. I wonder what that power is. Everything is miscellaneous. It's interesting.
Well, what they're yeah,
Go ahead.
what they're finding is that the premise is that technology is order, but it gets to in certain kinds of situations, it's not. It's disorder. It's just and that was the thing with the website for the healthcare.
For the healthcare program,
because
yeah, right.
as we were talking before videotaping this, at one point when they first started trying to take online sign-ups, enrollments, there were 250,000 people every 15 minutes. I don't think there's any website that can handle it. And so it's been from the depths of the need. There's 45 million people who did not have health care before. There are also other people, a huge number, that have health care, but if you can call it that, where, it just covers catastrophic, And so now you've got people really interested, really want to sign up, and it's overwhelming the website.
Yes.
So that you would
but
think
at least
that
they can triage isn't the word. They can at least get some connection and get something started, and at least know that they might be able to come in at a later time or something like that. If they can't get something completed, they get some idea of what their timeline will be, or they can get some preliminary information in there and come back and update it.
Well, what's fascinating to me is that people
Yeah.
think, website, the resources are limitless. No, they're not. They're really finite.
Yeah.
Even on a big scale,
Right.
They're finite, and they require the resources to be able to handle that kind of volume.
I heard some news reports earlier before they quote-unquote fixed the Healthcare Act website that part of this disorder was due to the fact that they had many different groups writing different parts of the program. And one of the essential, I guess, issues of that is that all those individual segments didn't coordinate in equally. That there was no, there must have been a master plan, there must have been some project management going on. I don't mean to say that, but the problem was some of the parts did not coordinate easily enough with the other parts, because everybody does, you can write an algorithm for 2 + 2 and everybody will do it differently. Or not everybody, but you'll get more than one solution. And so now you've got solutions with all kinds of checks and balances, and the serious nature of signing up for healthcare. I think people may have expected it to be as see-through as, say, or thoughtless in the sense that I don't have to think about all this working. When you go to Google or Amazon, things happen immediately. You look for a book, you get a book. You want to buy it, you click buy, it happens. And this kind of disorder was of a different nature. I mean, it was flawed. They didn't have it ready. So
well, they had it ready, but for a certain level. And that's what I'm saying. The thing that bothers me when people talk about technology, there's all these presumptions that technology is limitless. It can do whatever you want it to do. No.
Yeah.
It's whoever programmed it.
Exactly.
They have the resources
you can do it up to
do
the
it.
limits of the
Yeah.
the individuals who are writing it. Right.
But there is a moral issue here, like you were talking about, that you do have to coordinate the thing. It can't be just willy-nilly, scattershot kind of thing.
Yeah.
And with a program of this magnitude, there's a lot of, and then you got to test it, because you can't just put it into play. Technology,
Yeah.
it's a really sore issue with me.
It's interesting. It's so massive that it's sometimes odd. It's sort of like saying we built a new aircraft carrier, but you know what? Somehow the automatic ejection, those launching high pressure launching things, they don't seem to be working right. And you go, well, wait a minute. That's the essence of the machine, How it's an aircraft carrier and launcher. How do you do that? I mean, I don't think that's happened, but the thing you're talking about or referring to is the whole testing while building analysis that goes on with provability as you go along, so that you have some something at the end.
I mean, I teach writing, so now there's a lot of technology about teaching writing. I still won't do it because the presumptions and how it's constructed have errors in them that I feel are profound. And so I don't want my students contaminated by trying to learn it that way. For example, a sore issue in teaching academic research writing is whether or not to use academic sources. And I require genuine, bona fide academic sources. Some of these online technologies don't make that distinction. They don't even define what an academic source is. That's not fair to the student, because sooner or later somebody's going to say, you're not using academic sources.
Right, yeah, yeah.
But there's all these things. And we're being encouraged, for example, one college I teach at, where they want to do a pre-test, post-test.
Yeah.
The problem is the presumptions underneath that about what the students are doing and how it's interpreted is flawed, fundamentally flawed, just like with the Obamacare thing, where it's not fair to the student or the teacher because it becomes apparent that the scores, because they're all talking about gearing it to learning outcomes, sooner or later the teacher's going to be evaluated based on your learning outcome scores.
Yeah.
I
think there's a point there about evaluation as well, because the values of a particular institution are, of course, different across the board. So there are some institutions which clearly their mission is maybe to be committed to the training or the education of students who might not be as well prepared, or because of economic or social conditions just haven't had the educational advantages that other students have. But when you get into the evaluation phase or the accountability phase, the criteria are across the board similar. So it's difficult to code in the pretest, I guess is the model you were saying, to code in those values or those difficulties or challenges. The word is challenges, not weaknesses, it's challenges. But some universities, I'm in the university environment, as are you, are based on other principles, not necessarily having the best educated students. They take students who need help to get up to a certain level. It's an approach of hope, really. So
see, in this illusion of quick and easy results, the scholarship often gets lost in the dust. For example, what you're talking about, evaluating students, really is a form of assessment. Here's some sturdy scholarship on assessment, and one of them is you have to have clear expectations. Your methods have to equal the objectives that you have. You can't just concoct something, and so we're being pressured to use this pretest thing with no discussion of assessment. And that's the key thing in terms of the pedagogy. How are you evaluating your students? On what basis? What can you learn from that in order to affect your teaching in the future and handle the student in a way that's productive and effective? Those are larger questions that technology is just a machine. It doesn't do anything that way. But the other thing that really bothers me about technology is it's invisible about who's getting the results. And in the session that we just had, a kind of an in-service thing, it became very apparent that whatever happens in our classrooms is being reported on up to the college administration. Because there's nothing on the program that says that.
in what format?
Well, that's another issue.
You're talking about these evaluation, pre-programmed evaluation documents that the students have to fill out?
The pre-test results were reported up, but it didn't tell us what details, what format. It just sort of kind of brushed aside, just a mention, but that's of huge importance, because if it's specified down to teacher and class, and then becomes a method of evaluating, an implicit, if not explicit method of evaluating that teacher, and you start developing criteria, an outcome assessment for that teacher, it's wicked stuff.
It is. I think the performance-based evaluation or accountability, performance-based assessment, it can be problematic because the performance is assumed to be of a certain type across all, like I was saying a moment ago, all the different types of institutions and principles that those institutions are built on are not necessarily taken into account with, you know, the performance of high grades on a pre-programmed test and whatnot. It's definitely an issue in education
Well, it's
today.
kind of like, you know, I watched their program on YouTube on the Manhattan Project.
Mm-hmm.
The people working on that had no idea how horrific of a thing they
The
were
results
creating
would be,
until after they exploded it
yeah,
and after Hiroshima.
yeah.
And then people like Albert Einstein said, "Oh my gosh, what have we done?" And that's what I'm saying.
They're thinking of who is going to have the power to control that. And
Yeah,
they're worried about
and
it.
that they can't.
A pure scientist can think in terms of, I don't know, whatever.
But the physicists and other technicians who work on
Magic of
that
physics,
were
yeah.
just thinking about this thing about how you have atoms
Yes,
interact.
on a pure
It was
science
a pure
level.
intellectual,
Right.
wonderful level.
Right. I mean,
Not
I think they
thinking about-
certainly, in theory, it would be releasing phenomenal amounts of energy. Then they saw that the theory worked.
Well, there was one little thing
They
that
knew
was
the theory would work.
kind of an aside in the program, but it is another horrific thing. They had not yet tested it to see what it would do. They were setting up the test when the bomb was actually loaded on the Enola Gay for Hiroshima.
They
didn't
put
know
pressure to get that bomb dropped. And you're right.
Before
I've
they
read-
even had tested it to
Right.
see what it was.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's another element.
They knew they had something that would work.
Yeah.
But they didn't know to
To
what
what
level.
extent? And that's what I'm saying, that's another horrific thing with technology. It has the ability to replicate to a magnitude that is beyond human comprehension, really.
Yeah.
But because it's so easy to set up, it's such an illusion, it's sort of like the
Yeah.
Everest thing, you know, that people set it into motion without thinking about the consequences, you know. And I thought, that's just horrible. And Einstein was just beside himself when he realized what they felt that they had taken the genie, released the genie out of the bottle,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. This idea of power of the new digital disorder, it sort of has two meanings to me. One is the unstated power that is sort of reflecting on disorder. Maybe the disorder has some advantage, some positive power. But then there's the other side that's the worry about this, and that is, it's saying the power of the new digital disorder that we might not actually take into account. It might be difficult to deal with. That's the power that was released in the atomic bomb.
Well, see, that's the illusion that we fall
Everything
into,
is miscellaneous.
that the technology is simple, it's easy to set into motion.
Yeah,
But we're not thinking about what is actually happening, and that has huge consequences that we still haven't dealt with. Nobody's talking about that. And when I talk with students and other people about technology, there's this consistent illusion that it's good, that it's easy, and it's infiltrated now into higher education.
Right.
It's good, it's easy. But then, like they had those huge computer online classes, some of the universities are shutting them down because, sure, maybe they had thousands and thousands of people, but only 4% ever finished the class.
Mm-hmm.
And that has no idea about the competence because nobody tested that. So, I mean, there's these elements.
yeah. I don't know why. You know, it's interesting. I don't know why that's surprising. If you have 100,000 people and 4,000 finish, you've done better in a way than that class would have done locally at the particular university where it's coming from. And you've also got people that were clearly committed to it in a way that might not be common in education. So I read that, there's an article, you might be referring to the same article that came out this week in New York Times about the failure of these massive classes. I don't know. Maybe it's
But so
not
there's
such
no
a failure.
information about what did they get, what did they learn. There's nothing. It's just the 4% that happened to finish
To
it,
finish,
to
right?
get watch all the lectures. There's no idea
Right.
what they learned.
Oh
from it.
well, presumably they finished, and they also did the exercises correctly. But
They
if they're not testing for that, then
No.
we at least had 4,000 to finish. Because I heard when, it's sort of an annual thing. Education goes on an annual basis, so it's the results this year and the next year. So when these massive courses came out, one of them was an artificial intelligence course from the first one that made it kind of newsworthy from Stanford. And the people who put that course together had their 1,600, 2,000 graduates, but they also had those folks being recruited by some major digital companies who are interested in artificial intelligence for programming and, I don't know, maybe security or whatever, but other aspects as well for intelligent design. Nope, wrong word, sorry. Interface design, Freudian slip, and other aspects. And they were positive. But of course they were trying to sell their idea. I mean, they're the people that designed the online course, so they're going to be up, putting a positive foot forward. So it still remains to be seen. I'm not convinced of the doomsday aspect of this yet, but
Well, a concern of many scholars and educators was what was really learned, if anything.
yeah.
And nobody knows after this. And there was this kind of exuberant celebration that we got all these people learning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's not learning just because people turn on their computers,
No,
and that's what bothered me about
but
it.
that's true of the classroom, the common everyday classroom.
Except when someone enrolls and they're there for the class, they have consequences for what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and there's interaction, But when people are just signing up, these were all free. I
Yeah.
mean, no one had to pay any registration.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of giddy thing, oh, we can educate a whole lot of people all at one time. No, I don't think so.
Well, I don't know. I think the verdict is still out. I think the jury's still out on that. I mean, I've taken a couple MOOCs, haven't finished them.
So you're among the great.
I'm one of the 96,000, and but I was really impressed by. I just didn't have enough time to do it during the week, but I was impressed by the input system and these are people who I took one on programming, I wanted to learn something about a particular program, and it just got to be just too much time. But the feedback I thought was remarkable. People were making their own videos, they were making explanations of different principles about programming theory and how computational things work, things that I knew nothing about. And I was learning a lot about that. Now, I wasn't taking a test on it. It's true. I didn't have a feedback system where I reflected. The feedback system was me writing my own program and having other people comment on it. And maybe the professors, here and there, or the grad students who are working. So I don't know, I thought it was pretty remarkable from the social network aspect of it. You had people internationally responding to some of these things.
But see, that's a different thing if you're not about a social network. But as an accountable educational classroom
Yeah.
or a learning activity, that's something else to me. That's a dear subject,
Well, it
in a certain
wasn't, it
relationship.
wasn't graded A to Z, A to F. You could pay $49 and get a certificate, and part of the grading, would presumably mean, yes, I finished, and I got, a certain grade level. I mean, there's a grading system in there, but it's based on feedback from your peers, not from, say, you, James Schaefer, as the expert writing instructor. It doesn't have that kind of feedback system where you know your students intimately. Any tests you have, you have feedback loops, give them a chance to rewrite or whatever, however that works, and it worked. It's a different way.
Something I haven't thought about as much as I probably should is that I think chaos theory might work to understand how technology works in our culture, because chaos theory has to do with expecting the unexpected. That you watch how the thing operates rather than with preconceived structures.
Notions about what the structure should
And
be. Right.
when I look at it that way, but that implies that you're still engaged philosophically and pedagogically with what's going on.
Yeah.
There's a deeper thing there. And
Right.
what I've seen people do is pretty superficial. it's like what you're talking about, the social network. Oh, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But as an educator, I'm very concerned about, well, what is going on? But on the other hand, there is that chaos theory thing of observing the dynamics of phenomena that are happening, and what can we learn from that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I still, I think this book is kind of along that way of saying, we really don't know as much as we think.
Yeah.
And that it can easily turn what you know into miscellaneous or non-ordered.
It's interesting. We're completely off. We're on topic, but by being off topic. I was at a conference last week on digital humanities, and one of the folks, I think he's working in one of the maybe University of Texas, had done an algorithm using a series of algorithms using an old program called Lisp, which is an artificial intelligence kind of program from one of the first ones, 60s and 70s, maybe even earlier. He had rewritten, or he re-scenarioed Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And he put in a series of intentions and verbs and adverbs and terminology, some, large number of terms, and then a program that would result in outcomes. And it was sort of psychological, intention and meaning. And so he took the one scene where Frankenstein, the monster, wakes up and becomes alive. And then there's this, in the original, Frankenstein is kind of horrified by what, Dr. Frankenstein is horrified by what he's created. And so he kind of rejects the monster, but the monster's, just the monster. Isn't good or evil necessarily, but, excuse me. At any rate, he takes that scene and runs it through the program. And it's really interesting because, for instance, there will be an expression of something on the face of Dr. Frankenstein when he sees the monster wake up for the first time.
Well, thank you for appearing on Rip Up again.
Oh, you're welcome. Are we through? What
Yeah.
happened? I'm ready to keep on going.